Welcome to the News and Views podcast by the Fintech Times. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFC News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Polly Jean Harrison, features editor at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Francis Bignell and I'm a journalist at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Tyler Smith and I'm a journalist at the Fintech Times.
Hello, and welcome back once again to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. It is a chilly day here, but what better day to be sat and cozy talking about fintech. So Tyler, Francis, how are you guys doing? I know Claire, our editor, is away in Hong Kong right now. What a cow, am I right? Having a wonderful time at a fintech conference there. But how are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, Polly. Very, very cold here. It's the January chill, I think. But yeah, fintech is keeping us warm. So no, it's been a good week. It's been a really good week. What about you, Francis?
Yeah, hey guys. I feel like I'm the odd one out here. I'm not cold whatsoever. I feel like these January chills just seem to skip where I'm living. But no, like you said, Tyler, I'm excited to be here to be chatting about fintech once again. I mean, everything still seems to be slowly getting back into the way that we know them to be. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be here.
Amazing stuff. And what are you guys going to be talking about this week?
So this week I'm going to be talking about fintech investment and how it fell in 2022.
I'm going to be talking about a recent report from Visa that at the time of recording just came out yesterday, and it's in regards to government disbursement programs and how they can be made digital.
Fantastic. I'm going to be talking about a similar topic to you, Francis, but fintech investment in Scotland specifically. But Tyler, why don't you go first, and then we have like a little bit of a investment chat at the end.
Oh, great. Well, I am happy to lead the way. Yes. So as I just mentioned in the intro, this is in regards to a new Visa report that at the time of recording has just been published. It's hot off the press. It's from Visa Government Solutions. Thank you very much to their team, by the way, for working with me on this article. Their report was titled Next Generation Government Disbursement Programs. And essentially what it did is it looked at government disbursement programs, looked at how they'd been used historically, and then tried to find a solution to how they could be digitalized to cure a variety of woes. So yes, essentially what a government disbursement program is anybody who remembers the pandemic might remember the government distributing welfare grants, especially to small businesses, seem to be large applicants of these grants. And they're essentially where public money is distributed to people in need. They're particularly useful when eradicating income inequality, for example. Now, what Visa did in its latest report was make three very key recommendations for how these programs could be made digital and more streamlined. Its first recommendation regarded the use of digital identification. This was particularly important in identifying who the applicant was and also in mitigating risks of fraud. The second recommendation was the use of mobile communications to raise awareness about the availability of such programs, and also as a means to apply for the programs as well. So it sort of doubled up on that second point. Lastly, the third recommendation centers around the use of digital payments, and it specifically looked at, although legacy payments as we see it now are more trusted and more familiar in certain senses, the report did explain how in largely cash-based societies, they were sort of exploring the use of more innovative payment systems, which I think is something we're really, really seeing in Asia at the moment. It looked in its report about what the actual problem was with disbursement programs, and it's sort of aligned with its three recommendations that people didn't really know how to apply, they didn't know how to access the information, and secondly, governments didn't know how to distribute money quickly and fast enough, especially to people that were hard to reach or the unbanked population as well. So I just want to get your guys' take on Visa's new report. What do you think of government disbursement programs, and do you think that there's anything that the report has missed in its recommendation? I mean, we've just sort of skimmed over it really, but do you think it's missed anything?
I No, I think for the most part, if you look at the three recommendations that it says, I think they're all very applicable. You know, this idea of digital identification and enabling financial inclusion, I think, is a huge thing that, we speak about financial inclusion all the time, but any sort of way that it can be achieved, I think, is a great help. Secondly, I think it identifies the importance of mobile communications in distributing reliable information relating to these programs. Again, this idea of inclusion, most people have a mobile, not everyone has a bank. And if you're looking about it that way, it sort of just again creates more avenues for digital accessibility. And lastly, I think the point that it brings up about digital payments and sort of how legacy systems have remained more popular, I wouldn't read into that too much about, or sorry, in a negative way upon sort of the challenges. I think legacy systems are always going to have more trust purely for the fact that they're what people have known for forever, really. And so, sort of changing the status quo and changing this idea of, what's the go-to service. It's no longer a legacy bank or a legacy financial service. It's going to be one of these challenges, one of these digital ones. I think that sort of change is sort of, it's something we're going to see in time. And I think that, identifying it now is sort of along the right track. And then, to be honest, I think it's only going to continue in this sort of manner.
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. We were very lucky to connect with Greg Shepherd, the global head of government disbursements at Visa, for this article. And he sort of confirmed exactly what you just said, in that we saw a lot of this play out in an emergency situation when it was the COVID pandemic, when businesses were shut and nobody could go anywhere or spend any money. That we really saw these sort of techniques come into play in disbursement programs, and I think they've sort of tried to build on that and look at that in like a retrospect and see maybe where areas of improvement could be made. So I think the recommendations were really, really cool. Polly, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think you and Francis have really summed up everything quite nicely. I agree with what Francis was saying. I think the report is pretty wide scoping, and I really appreciate the sort of using the data from the COVID-19 pandemic, because obviously that's still quite fresh in everyone's minds, and a lot of things came out of that pandemic that really did have sort of applications for continuing on with like normal life, or whatever normal life may be. So it's really nice that nice, that's probably not the right word, but it's good to see that data is being used, as it's a perfect example of where some of these issues can unfold. And I guess the main kind of thing of the report is just having modern solutions to modern problems. We do have issues when it comes to accessing certain systems and certain things, like these disbursement schemes, and so having the solutions to that, to bring them into the current digital age, I think is really important, especially when it comes to digital payments, and obviously how much we're hearing about that at the moment. I like that it's sort of mentioned financial inclusion, and I still think that's really important, and is going to be really important this year, especially when we think about things like the cost of living crisis in the UK specifically, and everything like that. And I think it was a good report to read, to knowing that someone's thinking about these things, and someone is thinking of ways that we can help sort of tackle this poverty, inequality, and financial exclusion. But obviously there are challenges in the way of that, but I'm confident with this report that the challenges can be overcome for sure.
Yeah, that's a brilliant, brilliant point, Polly. I think in such a fast-paced industry like fintech, it's really sort of refreshing to see reports that sort of take a look over their shoulder and be like, well, this is a real world example of this, but how can it be sort of fixed and bettered in a way? I think that was really, really good of Visa. And yeah, government disbursement programs, I think in terms of financial inclusion, I think it'll end up doing a lot this year. And I think this report is very, very timely in that sense. And we could talk about this all day, but maybe we should move on to story number 2. Why don't we go for you, Polly? Why don't you lead us away?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tyler. So I was looking at investment, specifically in investment into Scotland's fintech scene, as it has come out that the investment into Scotland fintech has jumped 200% as the community has really prospered. So Scotland has really developed itself into a fintech epicenter, receiving record levels of investment funding last year, with the sector attracting significant investment funding and growing a community of small and medium-sized enterprises, SME firms, which is obviously very good. And according to Fintech Scotland, which is the independent not-for-profit cluster body, Scottish fintechs has received over £305 million in funding over the course of the last year, which is the 200% increase in the amount of funding over the year previously. And that sort of is very looking at a lot at sort of data and payment innovation. So fintech SMEs with a specific focus on data and payments raised about 60% of that total funding, which kind of shows you where the appetites are for fintech, I think. And, like we keep saying, payment is always going to be a huge thing. And data is really just creeping up and up and up in terms of popularity. And according to Nicola Anderson, who is the Fintech Scotland Chief Executive, the levels of investment seen in 2022 cements the value of fintech innovation and propels us to continue driving cluster excellence, build on the recognition we achieved in 2022, and the role we play in contributing to the wider UK fintech ecosystem. So there were a couple of reasons why I thought this would be a really interesting one to discuss on the podcast today with you guys. First off, obviously, it's a great thing. We love seeing investment. We love seeing fintech growing, especially when we think about SMEs and things like that. It's all about getting the competition right and having the sector grow as much as possible. But then also, I thought it was really interesting to think about it from a geographical perspective, because I know kind of when we talk about the UK fintech scene, a lot of the time we are obviously centered on London, which is just the way it is. There's a lot of fintech in London. And it is a huge epicenter, which is one of the things we do learn at Fintech Week London, event that we have all been to several times, well, twice now. But I think what we're kind of learning is that other places within the UK are actually have really budding fintech sectors to the point where, maybe London isn't just the fintech center of the UK anymore, right? Because obviously we've got, Cardiff with a really booming insurtech scene, as well as many others. Scotland now, obviously, with this huge investment. Manchester, all places like this, they all have really big fintech scenes. So I guess what I want to talk about is to whether we think that these clusters will really sort of start to grow even more and overtake London, and it just be the UK as a great fintech scene rather than think about London specifically. So yeah, I mean, what do you guys think, Francis? What are your thoughts?
Yes and no, I think, is where my immediate answer to that is that will these other fintech clusters grow? Yes. Will they overtake London? I don't think so, because as they grow, so does London. And I think that because London is such an epicenter right now, and it is such a sort of a core for all these other regions and different countries, different cities to really expand their fintech scenes, I think any growth that happens in these cities and countries, like I said, I think that all comes back to benefit London. And the only thing that I can think of right now is, that saying, like, all roads lead to Rome type of thing. I think that sort of applies here in the sense that, any success that is seen in the UK fintech wise will sort of reach back to London. And just because like I said, it's like the home base for so many organizations, and it is such a central point for people to associate fintech with the UK, if you know what I mean. It's I'm probably not conveying this in the best way possible, but I just think whatever way that, everywhere else grows, I think London benefits from that as well, so it never gets overtaken.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and that's a really good point. I guess for them to really overtake London, we'd have to stop London growing, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. But I suppose the kind of the COVID-19 pandemic that we were just talking about also kind of helped with this sort of cluster growth, right? Because people were leaving London, going to the countryside. Or different places in the UK, different cities. But now I think there is a bit of a shift to now everyone's going back to London. So maybe the moment's passed. But Tyler, what do you think?
I am just on the fence as Francis is actually. I think that Scotland has done well to position itself as a leader in the digital space anyway. And I think that the sort of exodus of talent from London caused by the pandemic has really done well to spread innovation around the UK. But if I just had to draw up some figures. I think they were from Innovate Finance from the 9th of January that was sent over, that saw that London was actually retaining a large proportion of the investment that went into the UK last year. Speaking on the findings, Khalid Talukta, co-founder of London fintech firm DKK Partners, he was talking about London's fintech industry having consistently proven itself to be both robust and ambitious in the face of economic challenges. And then he goes on to say that as businesses brace for a turbulent 2023, fintech firms can play a vital role in enabling international trade, faster payments, and delivering financial exchange services to companies seeking to boost productivity. So I think, I don't know. I think congratulations to Scotland, and I think that it'll do well to sort of move the whole of the UK up as an epicenter for fintech and for the wider digital scene. But I think London really is sort of retaining this large scale investment, and maybe we sort of need to progress the conversation to ask why is that happening still, if maybe city living isn't as popular as it was before, or maybe it's returning to popularity. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. Thank you, Tyler. I guess it's just one of those debates that we'll never probably quite have an answer to, but it's great to see that so much investment really is growing everywhere. But anyway, Francis, to carry on a little bit of investment chat, why don't you kick it off with yours?
Yeah, so thanks, Polly. My article sort of isn't in such a positive light, I suppose, because Innovate Finance, an industry body representing the UK fintech community, has revealed that global fintech investment levels fell in 2022. And I think before I get into sort of the nitty-gritty details, I think it's important to note that it was always going to be difficult for investment levels to follow 2021, I think, because obviously in 2021 everyone was sort of coming out of the pandemic, or the 2020 levels of the pandemic, I should say. And there was like this resurgence of wanting to spend more money and wanting to invest, and sort of almost saying, well, if I invest now and something like this ever happens again, there could be like a disaster or something like that. And it could sort of act as an insurance policy to prevent a disaster. And so I think it doesn't really come as a surprise. But the stats that Innovate Finance found, I think, were really interesting, in that in 2022, total investment in fintech reached $92 billion. But this represented a decrease of 30% when compared to 2021, in which the industry amassed an investment total of $130 billion. And it sounds bizarre, but it's one of those things that I always see, social media posts sort of saying, like, do you realize how much a billion really is? And sort of when you think about all the little intricacies that make up a billion and how many millions go into that compared to how many thousands go into a million, again, that probably sounds really silly, sort of almost like a tongue twister, but it really is a lot of money. And it's sort of just so surprising that, there was almost 1,000 less deals in 2022 in fintech compared to in 2021. And I guess what I wanted to discuss with you guys is, what are the reasons for this really? Is it just the hype has died down? Is it people now trying to be a bit smarter with money? Like, has there been, of course, is cost of living and sort of like the economic crisis that we're sort of facing? Without a doubt, that has played a part in it. But I don't know. These are the sort of things that I wanted just to bring up with you and sort of get your viewpoints on, and as to why this has happened. And do you think it's a trend that we're going to continue to see in 2023, or is fintech's popularity going to rise again? Tyler, I'll go to you first.
Well, first of all, Francis, I have to publicly apologize. I didn't realize I was actually quoting figures from your article before when we were discussing Polly's article, when I was talking about Innovate Finance's other data. But in terms of the rate of investment that we're seeing, I think that we're now in such an uncertain time in sort of the post-pandemic, and I think that what we're seeing in fintech is a direct translation to perhaps what we're seeing in the rest of the investment world. When we look at a lot of the top companies for investments, their value has fallen significantly over the last year, and I think that represents the sort of general sort of blanket level of uncertainty that's being driven by the post-pandemic blues in a way. Do I think it'll carry on into 2023? I hope not. but in my honest opinion, I think we'll see something similar, maybe a little less severe. I think, yeah, that's going to be my final answer.
Yeah, I think it really does depend, because I mean the article does go on to sort of say that, you know, not everyone really saw a downturn. Singapore, for example, saw an increase of 41% in its investment compared to the previous year, and that saw it rise from 7th to 4th worldwide in regard to investment totals. And another notable thing is that I think the UK, of course, Innovate Finance being the UK fintech body, they discuss how the UK actually only had really a loss of 5%. Or sorry, the London, for example, actually had a loss of 5%, as the capital received 10.2 billion throughout the year when compared to 2021. And I mean 5% compared to, you know, the original decrease of 30%. I think it's really impressive to see, and sort of shows the resiliency of UK fintech and sort of its continued popularity. And I think as we sort of come into this time where, you know, organizations and investors are more willing to risk their money, I suppose, and sort of take a chance on some companies, they're going to want to go with areas and regions that have a proven track record. And I think London and the UK is a really good example of this. Polly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think obviously, like we were saying previously about the cost of living crisis, it's been a tough time economically for everyone, and I think it's quite obvious that we're going to see that reflected in investment as well. People just don't have perhaps the same amount of funds that they did before. And I think, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Will 2023 continue this trend? I'm not sure. I'm pretty hopeful. You know, I like to wage on the side of optimism here. And I think things will pick up. But investment's just such a tricky thing entirely, you know, and it's something that obviously fintech and the industry really depends on. So I think we need it to pick up if we want to see some innovations and new things coming out over the course of this year and obviously in years to come. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will this year will pick up a little bit. In the same way, I'm hopeful that just the economy in general is going to pick up this year a little bit too.
No, I think, I mean, I completely agree. And I think that an interesting point as well is when you take your article, Polly, and sort of look at the attitude and sort of the optimism there. I think that is sort of reflective of what a lot of companies and a lot of people are feeling, is that, you know, yeah, there has been this sort of downward cycle this past year. You know, not as many deals were made, but looking on the side of optimism, like you said, there is sort of everything seems to indicate that fintech popularity isn't going anywhere, and investors still do have faith in it, which they should at the end of the day, because, you know, fintech's great. But yeah, no, I think that sort of rounds out our conversations this week, and I think we got a nice little discussion. You know, the pros, cons, and here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, some good chat this week. Thank you guys. If you would like to hear any more about the stories we've talked about today or anything else about fintech, head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where there's plenty of news and insights there for you to read. And then moving on to what I learned this week. Each week, new information across our desks all the time, being part of the editorial team. So we're learning new things about fintech every single day. So we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So Tyler, what did you learn this week?
This week, I learned that ESG measurements for early stage businesses were described as inherently dangerous. This is the opinion of Amory Polden, who is the founder of D2 Fund, a climate tech investor. He was speaking on Conversations of Climate, and he described it as essentially not very specific when or applicable to the measurement of early stage companies. So, yeah.
Awesome. And Francis, what have you learned this week?
Thanks, Polly. What I learned this week was that NerdWallet released a new report called the Household Debt Report, and in it found that 83% of women and 62% of men have admitted to owing up to £5,000 in debt. However, men, 13%, are more likely than women, 6%, to owe greater amounts between £5,001 and £10,000.
Thank you, Francis. And what I learned this week was how NatWest's Rooster Money has found that thousands of children are aiming to save an average of £697.11, which seems like a lot of money to me. And these are kids from like 6 to 17. And when I was a kid, a tenner was great. So that just seemed like a really big average amount. But anyway, guys, thank you so much once again for joining me on the podcast. It has been really fun to chat to you as always. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks very much, guys. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the News and Views podcast by the Fintech Times. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversations using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.